Welcome back to the FTN NFL Draft Team Preview Series. I'm your host, Mike Randle, Chief Content Officer here at FTN. Follow me on Twitter at RandleRant. We continue our mission to go to each and every one of the 32 NFL teams, and today we stop in Denver to talk to the great Troy Renck, Denver Broncos insider for Denver 7, host of the Broncos podcast with Tony Renck, and the 2019 Colorado Sportscaster of the Year. He is the perfect person to talk about Denver here, a team with a lot of potential and a lot of changes that, of course, we're focusing on here at FTN. Follow him on Twitter at Troy Renck. Troy, thanks for joining us. How you doing?
Fantastic, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
Appreciate it, sir. And of course, let's look back. Last year, disappointing year, a lot of expectations with Russell Wilson coming in, but the Broncos have taken a lot of steps to change, make sure that doesn't happen again. Brand new coaching staff here in Denver.
Yeah, I mean, last year was just a cascade of failures, an unmitigated disaster in every way. And given the expectations, it's probably the most disappointing season in these past 7, which include no playoff berths and 6 straight losing seasons for the first time since 1963 to 72. That was pre-NFL, Mike. So,
wow.
Yeah, so the juxtaposition from Nathaniel Hackett to Sean Payton has been jarring. Sean Payton reminds me so much of Mike Shanahan, whom I covered for several years. I mean, he oozes intensity. The message starts and stops with him. It's all business. Where Hackett last year was a caffeinated personality, Mr. Bro Hug, be nice to everyone. And he was a nice guy. He just clearly was overmatched as a head coach with a miscast coaching staff for the most part. Sean Payton is going back to what's worked for him. This will be his 16th season. He's got 152 wins. So he has the gravitas of that plus the Super Bowl. And it's just all business. For the first time since I've covered the Broncos, that started briefly in 93, but 96 to 2000. And then 2014 to now, for the first time, we don't have access to the players in April.
Wow.
We shut it all down. They're just lifting and running. There'll be no football activity, even during they have a mandatory veteran, not a mandatory, but a voluntary veteran minicamp that would be available to them later this month, the 24th to the 27th. That will not happen. He believes part of their injury issues were related to not being ready to play football. And so it's just completely different. We may not have access to players until May. So that stinks from the media perspective because you want to tell the story of these players, especially all of the new players. But from a coaching standpoint, I can understand it that he's basically saying, put your head down, don't talk about it, be about it, stop, no more hype machine. They've been terrible the last 6 years. They're 6-18 in their last 24 AFC West games. They've lost all home field dominance. So let's stop talking about who we're going to be and just go do it. And so I understand why he's doing it this way, but it is a remarkable change from just a year ago at this time.
Yeah, changing culture, which needs to happen because the AFC West, of course, the most competitive division in all the NFL, just teams, great quarterbacks, coaches across the board. So Payton has things on the right track. Let's look at the offensive weapons here now. Of course, you can talk about Russ, see the resurgence. He was injured. Javonte Williams, of course, is coming back from the ACL. Tim Patrick as well, Courtland Sutton. So a lot of options here in offense. Talk about the health overall, the offensive players, and how they think they'll be here on the first week of the season.
Well, they've remade the offensive line to be more physical with the signings of Mike McGlinchey at right tackle and Ben Powers at left guard. I mean, Sean Payton has sent the message. He brought in a fullback. He brought in Samaje Perine because Javonte Williams, I talked to Javonte late January, early February, and he's cleared every hurdle. He's rehabbing here in Denver area at the Broncos headquarters, but there's no guarantee he's going to be ready when the season starts. Okay. I mean, he had not only ACL, but some other damage. So I've been told keep an eye on how the J.K. Dobbins recovery went. So it could be a bit. So Samaje Perine protects them. He could start. You could re-sign Latavius Murray as his backup until Javonte Williams is ready. But number one thing is Sean Payton wants to take the pressure off Russell Wilson. He has said, get him off the high dive. He wants to make sure that they don't have to win games because of him. He can be a complimentary piece, and then on some days he's their best player. But they're going to be more physical. And in the NFL, you know this, Mike, it's not about running when you want to. It's running when you have to. Can you get 3 yards, 4 yards in the first quarter and then get in the fourth quarter? And the Broncos have not been able to do that. If you can't stop and if you can't run and stop the run, you're not usually a good football team. So that's number one. The weapons, it starts with Russell Wilson. He's got to get healthy. He had a torn labrum last year. He had a hamstring issue, and he had a concussion. He had his worst season of his career, 16 touchdowns, 11 picks. I mean, it was a disaster in every way. He was trying to reinvent himself as Drew Brees, where he wasn't running. And it showed he's just not – that's not suited to his skill set. He's suited to be a play action guy, hit the deep strikes, move the pocket, and especially keep pressure off him up the middle. If you watch Drew Brees with the Saints, that's one thing. They were so physical up front in the interior. He rarely had people in his lap. That was the exact opposite last year for Wilson. So, number one, he has to be healthy. He's got to play within himself. And he's got to listen to Sean Payton, because Sean Payton's not going to have it. He's not going to listen to the excuses and here's the changing it and doing it Russell's way. It's going to be Sean Payton's way, and Russell's going to have to follow suit. And he did that in Seattle. And I think from talking to people around Russ, he was humbled by last year. He understands he has to take to coaching. They're not good enough offensively right now to be a great team for me. Jerry Jeudy showed he could be a number one receiver at the end of the year, like 500-plus yards over those last 6 games. Courtland Sutton, I mean, the problem with Courtland, he just doesn't get separation consistently. He's got 2 touchdowns his last 26 games. I would trade him, but there's just not a lot of market for him. And I'm still not convinced they won't trade one of them before the draft or at the draft, because it's not a great receiver class. But keep an eye on Greg Dulcich. Can they get something out of him and Albert Okwuegbunam? And Tim Patrick, to me, is their steadying force. They missed his leadership. They missed his He's just an old pickup truck. He's Mr. Reliable. All he does is catch the football and convert first downs. So his return will help. But for me, they need either KJ Hamler to be healthy or add more speed offensively in the draft.
Yeah, and Tim Patrick, I agree, very underrated. That was something he went down early, heading into the season. We knew it was going to be a loss for sure. And Courtland Sutton, like you said, up and down, just doesn't seem to separate, but has had those big plays down the field. I remember watching those, Troy, and thought he could really, he's a guy who came out of college. I thought Dallas was going to get him. The question was, did they pass on him? But really, like you said, just hasn't clicked. And Jeudy finished on a great note to end the year.
Yeah, when Sutton's case, in fairness to him, he just hasn't been the same player since ACL surgery a couple years ago. He just has not been the same guy. Jeudy is a great route runner. I think the issue he's going to have to learn with Sean Payton is that when the ball's not coming to you, you got to be playing well off ball. You got to run the routes the right way. You've got to block when asked to. You got to be a complete player under Sean Payton. But Jeudy matured remarkably during the season last year. And when I talked to Pat Surtain about him, he just said, hey, just put his head down and went to work. Instead of, complaining and it wasn't happening and he was dealing with some ankle issues, he just said, I got to get better. And he did. And he showed he can be a number one. I would keep him. I understand why they would move him, because he has value. If you're trying to get up into the second round in this year's draft, maybe get a second and third for him. So I get it, especially if you don't want to pick up his option. Because if you're going to keep him, for me, you almost have to pick up his option, which is a reasonable $12 million. But he has a chance, and he and Russell Wilson work well together. I just think they need one more guy, a speed guy, and that should be KJ Hamler. It's just unfortunate. He has had hamstring issues. He tore his ACL, and he had a pin inserted in his hip. That the ACL and hip issue were 2 years ago. Last year it was the hamstring. When he's on the field, he's a dynamic player, but availability is a skill in the NFL, and he just has not been healthy.
Let's turn to the defensive side of the ball here. Now, of course, defense kept them in the game a lot of times throughout the season. Denver finished 10th in team DVOA, obviously strong against the pass, had some issues against the run. But talk about the defensive side of the ball, free agents, and where you think they're going to keep the strength of the team here moving forward to keep them in these games here as the offense starts to develop under Payton.
Well, their 2 best players are on defense, and that's Pat Surtain, who was all-pro last year and only his second year at corner, and Justin Simmons, their free safety. Those are their 2 best players on the team, not defense, just on their team. So it starts there. Up front, they've got to be a little better stopping the run, as you mentioned. They give up Jermont Jones, and they sign Zach Allen. Part of that is that Zach Allen is better against the run than Draymond Jones historically. You can argue that Draymond is a little better pass rusher, but Allen is more of a complementary piece in terms of the way he defends the run. So that could help. They lack depth there. They're going to have to add a piece. They need to add an edge rusher. For the defense to be better than they were last year, 2 things have to happen for me. Zach Allen has to be the run stopper they think he can be, and Randy Gregory has to be healthy for like 12, 13 games. And that's a huge bet. Randy Gregory is a fascinating guy, one of my favorite players I've ever interviewed. He just can't stay on the field. Obviously, a lot of it was related to drug suspensions on rules that have since changed. But last year, he hurt his knee against the Raiders early in the season, and he essentially was done. And until that point, a month into the season, he was one of the most disruptive players in the league in terms of pressure, causing fumbles, just havoc. So they got to get him on the field. This is his last year of guaranteed money. He's got to be on the field. He's got to be a 10-sack guy if they're going to get to where they want to go. Nick Bonito, the kid from Oklahoma, has to take the next step. You've got Jonathan Cooper. But, I mean, the reality is Gregory has to be a guy if your defense is going to get to where it wants to be. They bring back Alex Singleton and Josie Jewell. I like the combination. They're a little short on coverage there, but Singleton is a tackling machine. They got to figure out what they're going to do at strong safety. I don't know if they'll bring Kareem Jackson back, but Caden Stearns, when healthy, again, really good young player. But their strength is Simmons. Their strength is Surtain. Vance Joseph has an ability to scheme things up. He's better than people realize as a D coordinator, but he needs Allen to be good to great, and they've got to get Gregory on the field for 2/3 of their games.
Troy, just incredible stuff. Last question, sir. We will get you out of here. Let's look at the draft. Of course, the Broncos make the trade. They end up getting Sean Payton, so they give up their early picks. They have 5 picks here, including 2 in the 3rd round. Do you see them trading up? How do you see it going if they just hold position in the 3rd round here? How are they going to attack the NFL draft this year with losing those picks early, obviously, in the Sean Payton acquisition?
Yeah, the Sean Payton and Russell Wilson trade. This is the last year of the Wilson, where you gave up the 1st and 2nds, and then essentially you traded Bradley Chubb for Sean Payton because you got a 1 from the Dolphins, and that's how you got Payton. And if this works out long term, that's a great trade. And I like Bradley Chubb a lot, but anyone would do that if you get a potential Hall of Fame coach who gets this thing back on track. I would think they're going to keep one of the 3rd rounders and trade the other one to try to pick up a couple picks to end up with 7. 5 is a really small number because, frankly, they need like 3 starters in the draft. I would think they're going to have to look at speed. And maybe a receiver falls in the draft. It's a straight speed guy. You've got to look at interior line, center, guard combo type player that can push Lloyd Cushenberry, that maybe is in your future starter next year, not this coming season. And they've got to get another edge rusher in the draft. They got to add one more edge rusher. They're light at edge rusher. So for me, it's interior offense, defensive line. Try to find an edge rusher. And if it falls, get a speed guy. Sean Payton's got a history of developing late round receivers. He doesn't need a 1st-round receiver. Marcus Colston, I mean, he's had a history of bringing in guys nobody knows about, and all of a sudden they become a 1 or a 2. So is there a guy like that can help kind of reshape the dynamic version of this offense that's clearly lacking? But they got to get another interior lineman. And for me, you can't walk away from this draft without adding to the offensive line, because this could be Garrett Bowles' last year too. Can you find a developmental tackle? Again, those are a lot of needs with 5 picks. That's why I expect them to keep one of their 3rd rounders, trade one to try to pick up a couple picks so they end up with 7 picks.
Troy, great stuff as always. Just an amazing 10 minutes here. Must follow folks on Twitter at Troy Renck, Denver Broncos Insider, Denver 7, 2019 Colorado Sportscaster of the Year. Just does amazing work with the Broncos. Troy, thank you so much. We're excited. NFL draft coming up now. A lot of insight here on the Broncos, a team that everyone is interested in nationally. Really appreciate a few minutes.
You got it, Mike. Thanks for having me on. Look forward to seeing you again.